So lies. We. Yeah.
Yeah, 110. Yeah,
Brown.
we're so, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Good morning again. It's Thursday. This is on another committee. It is
I don't think so.
the 11th of April. We're resuming our work on 687. We're on page 10. Well, 11.
Can I just ask what time we're going till?
We're going until 11:30,
Okay.
at which point we have, maybe what did it say?
Okay,
1, 2, 3, 11. Well,
great. I feel so much better.
so I think we're gonna make.
All right. All right, so on 110, we are talking about designated centers. 110. Line 18. To maintain and establish step 3 center after the initial approval of a regional plan future land use map by the ERB. The municipality shall apply for renewal and meet the program requirements upon application for approval of a regional plan future land use map. That may require some revision. Maybe. I'm not entirely sure what that means. Will you maybe put that?
Well, it also sort of jumps out, but whatever, we'll see something back, but.
Step 3, well, so it continues. Step 3 designations that are not approved for renewal revert to step 2. The municipality may appeal the administrative decision of the department to the state board. Appeals of administrative decisions shall be heard by the state board at the next meeting following timely filing stating the reasons for the appeal. The state's board decision is fine. Fair enough. The department may issue guidelines to administer these steps. So on page 11. Step 1. Requirements.
I'm sorry, what is issue guidelines?
Produce guidelines.
It's the legal status of guideline.
Guidelines are documents that a department can issue whenever they want. They're not bound by the strictures of rules. But this is like information for the municipalities to have when making their application.
You mean like advice or something?
Specificity on what should go in an application, I think it's pretty standard for programs that have application processes to have guidance accompanying the application so that towns know what to include.
Thank you.
And in terms of if someone doesn't follow the guidance, like they omit something, then a rejection, someone could reject an application. That kind of. Which, this came up in Alpha this morning. Statute, rule, procedure, guidance, and what was the effect under law of guidance, so that. Mine's coming up again here.
You could change guidelines to guidance, if that would be helpful.
Sorry. They may do it, you're saying that departments are not prohibited from issuing guidelines. That's what we're saying.
Yes. They're also, they don't,
have a back way to say something.
well, they don't have to. So we're about to walk through a statute on what information is required to get to each thing.
That you don't have to issue.
Or if you think it is clear enough, the department may not need to issue guidelines.
I apologize, I'm trying to make a big silence and embarrassing. Well, that's all, but that was.
let's read through and see if it seems clear enough. I suppose it's a natural thing for them to, but if it's trying to administer a program to succeed, put out guidelines to help people make lead timely applications, stuff like that, rather than get frustrated in the application process.
Alright, so step one, requirements. Step one is established to create an accessible and low barrier entry point for all villages throughout the state to access site-based improvement supports and conduct initial planning. All downtown and village centers shall automatically reach step one upon approval of the regional plan future land use map by the ERB. Regional plan future land use maps supersede pre-existing designated areas that may already meet the step one requirement. Benefits. A center that reaches step one is eligible for the following benefits. So just to preview, the benefits in this section and the next section are nearly identical to the list of existing benefits for designated areas. They have been realigned to fit within these designated areas. There isn't too much that is new. Sorry, so I'll stop there. So funding, so benefits, funding and technical assistance for site-based projects, including the Better Places Grant Program. Access to the downtown and village center tax credit program described in 32 VSA 5930. And other programs identified in the department's guidelines.
For Better Places Grant Program, can we do a site like we do for Village Center Tank programs where it's 32 BSA, but
Sure.
we'll know where to look.
And on page 112, funding for developing or amending the municipal plan, visioning and assessments. I don't know specifically what this is referring to. It might be the municipal planning grants, it might not be. On page 112, step 2, requirements. Step 2 is established to create mid-level entry point for emerging villages throughout the state to build planning and implementation capacity for community scale projects. A center reaches step 2 if it meets the requirements of step 1, or if it has a designated village center or new town center under chapter 76A of this title upon initial approval of the regional plan future land use map and prior to December 31st, 2026.
Didn't you repeal 76A?
Yes, but this is referring to the fact that things were designated under that chapter under a prior program.
So the fact that it's no longer existent doesn't matter for this.
Yes, so I do think there is a lot of complicated legal issues happening here about when things should be repealed. Because there is an overlap. So this is why this is in a separate chapter, because I couldn't just replace the words in 76A with this. So you could further delay the chapter 76A repeal farther out if you'd like, that might make sense. But I do think there will be existing resources that exist online and elsewhere to the fact that a prior program existed under that statute that led to 200 towns having designations.
And 76A continues to operate for a few more years.
Yeah,
Do you think it works? As far as you know, the timeline works okay right now. Maybe this is something we can get tested.
well, I would love to have testimony if the timeline works.
Okay,
I hope someone is thinking about that other than me,
okay.
because I'm concerned it maybe doesn't fully work, and I'm happy to have feedback on that.
Okay,
Well, another
Right.
ACCD visit question.
I think at the moment, it basically works. I do worry about the transition period. So, I guess I'll just say briefly, this proposal came out of the designated area update report that was commissioned by the department and worked on for, over a year. That report did not contain any suggested legislative language. And the report was quite long and in some ways lacked specificity. So I drafted this.
Based on that,
Yes,
these timing wise. You had to take a first cut at, actually, you had to do the same thing for everything, like. Define the tiers and, the whole thing, so. Using the necessary updates report,
the regional plan report had a lot of language in it.
right,
Basically, your last.
Don't say that. This is a huge bill that is based on a lot of recent work
yeah,
that didn't necessarily come with language in all instances.
I get it, and. I'm just asking, when this was being assembled in the House committee. Did ACCD come in, and walk through this, and did they make adjustments, and did all this conversation around timing and transition language occur? Or some did, but.
There were some conversations.
Okay,
So the House did work on this quite a bit. The department did provide an initial route of edits.
But it would be great to have them come in and maybe give some.
it's
Certainly they're
a
invited.
week or two older, so people may have done more thinking, and we have questions, okay?
Alright, on page 112, line 12. So a center meets step 2 if it has a confirmed municipal planning process. A municipal plan with goals for and a municipal plan with goals for investment in the center. Benefits. In addition to the benefits of step 1, a center that reaches step 2 is eligible for the following benefits. General grant priority for bylaws and special purpose plans. Capital plans and area improvement. Or for reinvestment plans. Including priority consideration for the Better Connections program and other applicable programs identified by Park Department guidance.
Better places.
Better Connections.
Okay.
Better Places is a different program, I believe.
But it wouldn't be another applicable program.
Oh,
Interesting.
maybe, that's in the step 1 benefit. Yeah, so they would be eligible. I don't know if it's. Yeah. Funding priority for infrastructure project scoping, design, engineering, and construction by the state program. On to page 15, the authority to create a special taxing district pursuant to chapter 87 of this title. For the purpose of financing both capital and operating costs of a project within the boundaries of a center. Priority consideration for a state and federal affordable housing funding.
Sorry, chapter 87, the TIFs,
It is not. It is special taxing districts. Which is a different program.
different in current program.
Yes.
Okay.
We'll get the tips in a minute. Authority for the municipal legislative body to lower the speed limit to less than 25 miles per hour in the center.
Yeah.
Which towns love that.
That is quite a benefit. Like, that is actually kind of a huge benefit.
Still state revolution here, okay.
Well,
And so that is an existing statute that provides it specifically for, I believe, downtowns currently. Statewide permit fees capped at $50 for residential development under 3 VSA 2822.
wait, can I just ask a question? On that? So you could put it limits to less than 20, so you could put 15 miles per hour. You could put 5, you could put 5 miles per hour.
I don't know if there are any specific guardrails on that, I can look, but
You could put guardrails.
Okay, so that is. Wow.
people love the speed limits.
I'm not surprised. I was on Go Bus. We had a lot of conversations about municipality wishing reset time.
Guys, this is only talking about speed limits, but. There are situations in which you might do speed reducing measures. Speed reduction measures, they're already allowed to do that. In those areas without. This,
Is that a question?
it is, yes, is that true?
Question mark? I don't know. I don't, not the transportation change.
I guess if they are allowed to do this, I would also like them to be able to have speed reducing measures that they could put in place. Cause like if you just lower the speed limit, that doesn't actually change anything. And. Right.
Curb bump outs.
Yeah,
Speed
they let
bumps and
They,
things like that.
Yeah.
So, and this is special interest groups. Can you look at that?
okay,
I think yes, that they already have.
yeah, I think they already have the ability to do that, but I don't know who would answer that.
Tucker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, agency of transportation, they may official this power as a question. And we don't currently have a transportation attorney, so,
I'm very aware.
yeah. All right, on page 113,
State wastewater permit fees capped at $50. You know what the current fund.
it's $50 for designated areas. So I don't know what it is otherwise,
Codified current copy stuff.
it is already in that statute.
Thank you.
As I mentioned, largely, these are all existing incentives that exist for designated areas. An exemption from the land gains tax,
The tax that they have for people that go in and buy a piece of property and flip it next week.
yes,
And you get, we want to encourage set flipping.
this is an existing benefit for designated areas.
We want to encourage buying and flipping properties.
I'm guessing someone would characterize it differently, but it's a question we could ask. ACCD.
And there may so that may be the intent, is to encourage the flipping or redevelopment of properties in designated areas for redevelopment purposes.
It's hard work.
And assistance and guidance from the Department for establishing local historic preservation regulations. Step 3. Alright, so step 3, so requirements, step 3 is established to create higher level entry point for downtowns throughout the state to create vibrant mixed use centers. A center reaches step 3 and maintains step 3 as a downtown if the department finds that it meets the following requirements. Meets the requirements of step 2, or if it has an existing downtown designated under chapter 76A of this title in effect upon initial approval of the future land use map and prior to December 31st, 2026. On page 114. If it is listed or eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. If it has a downtown improvement plan, has a downtown investment agreement, has a capital plan adopted under 4430 of this title. That implements the downtown improvement plan. Has a local downtown organization with an organizational structure necessary to sustain a comprehensive long-term downtown revitalization effort, including a local downtown organization that will collaborate with municipal departments, local businesses, and local nonprofit organizations. The local downtown organization shall work to enhance the physical appearance and livability of the downtown district by implementing local policies that promote the use and rehabilitation of historic and existing buildings, by developing pedestrian-oriented design requirements, by encouraging new development and infill that satisfy such design requirements. And by supporting long-term planning that is consistent with the goals set forth in 4302 of this title. Build consensus and cooperation among the many groups and individuals who have a role in the planning, development, and revitalization process. On page 115. Market the assets of the downtown district to customers, potential investors, new businesses, local citizens and visitors. Strengthen, diversify, and increase the economic activity within the downtown. And measure annually progress and achievements of the revitalization efforts as required by department guidelines. Has available public water and wastewater service and capacity. Has permanent zoning and subdivision bylaws. Has historic preservation regulations for the district. With a demonstrated commitment to protect and enhance the historic character of the downtown through the adoption of bylaws that adequately meet the historic preservation requirements of 4414, unless recognized by the program as a pre-existing designated new town center. And has adopted design or form-based regulations that adequately regulate the physical form and scale of development. So most of these requirements come directly from what is currently required for a downtown under the state designation program.
It is the language saying from, from its in current laws themselves.
I believe it is nearly identical to the requirements of the downtown program in chapter 76A. I don't remember how many changes the House made in this section.
Okay. I don't want to really disclose that, but some of these things just seem, they're not capitalized, so, they're not necessarily, for instance, top page 114, line 3, has a down to conclusion. Is that a generic term that we use, or that's actually something we create and it's under a program, and we have citations that tell you what constitutes a valid downtown improvement program?
That is a current requirement of getting the downtown designation. I don't think there's a separate citation for what outlines what needs to be in that plan.
So, yeah. Follow up on slide. Okay, well, I don't want to slow us down.
All right, page 115, benefits. In addition to the benefits of steps 1 and 2, a municipality that reaches step 3 is eligible for the following benefits. Funding for the local downtown organization and technical assistance from the Vermont Downtown Program for the center. On to page 116. A reallocation of receipts related to the tax imposed on sales of construction materials as provided in 32 VSA 9819. This is an existing. Eligibility to receive national main accreditation from Main Street America through the downtown program. Signage options under the billboard law. Certain housing limitations under chapter 117 of this title. Highest priority for locating proposed state functions by the Commissioner of Buildings and General Services or other state officials in consultation with the municipality, department, state board, the General Assembly, committees of jurisdiction for the capital budget, the Regional Planning Commission. So this is existing. When a downtown location is not suitable, the commission shall issue written findings on to the consulted parties, demonstrating how the suitability of a state function to a downtown location is not feasible. Funding for infrastructure project scoping, design, and engineering, including participation in the downtown transportation and related capital improvement fund program established by 5808 of this title.
So line 6 on 116, certain housing appeal limitations for 117. So if we go to 117, this is already spelled out what those certain appeal limitations are. And if you are a step 3 or everyone is eligible for those appeal limitations.
So you will recall that you recently passed last year and the year before limitations on what municipal permits can be appealed based on whether or not a project is located in the designated section. That is what that is referring to. I can get you the specific citations if you'd like. But no, nowhere else in statute currently references step 3. Which is what I was saying before, that in the future, there are a lot of cross references to downtowns, new town centers, village centers. NDAs and growth centers that will need to be corrected because they're not corrected in this bill. And so that's why, for the most part, the citations are here. Because there will be a question, like for the speed limits, I think it only says downtowns can lower their speed limits, but now we're talking about centers with a step designation, so. Yes, that is an issue. But these designations won't happen for a couple of years out, so there will be time to pass a technical correction bill. Updating all those references.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean,
You know what?
I just, I have a lot of confusion about this particular area. And I feel like I don't even have an articulated question, they don't actually understand how much. What the implications. So I,
Say,
Yeah,
Main Street, accredited whatever association, and we're halfway down the page before you can even look it up on Google. And find out that where Google imposes certain requirements on people to get the designation, and we're outsourcing it to accreditation standards, which of course are voluntary, but you don't have to apply. It's pretty far from home.
I think what would be helpful for me to understand, and I don't know if this would also help you, Senator, but I would really appreciate if we had some dedicated time to walk through this with ACC.
yeah, I think there's.
Like a good amount of time, because there's a lot of just like, I don't understand.
Agreed, yeah, so,
I think I need a chart.
we have a chart,
Cool.
Alright,
but we got it like 2 months ago, so.
Oh, yes, there may have been already submissions from the department, so.
I mean, when they came in, I think the big program was like 186 page report, and then like a chart, really just. So we will schedule some. Just
so
to review, blow down and listening, so we really understand what's here.
So I will say that, I believe that most, if not all of these things listed are existing benefits for downtowns. They're being transferred here. There is an exception to that, however, the Ways and Means Committee removed reference to TIF districts. So, this is a conversation to have, which is the. I am not a TIF attorney, so I'm going to explain this as best that I can. The TIF program has a number of requirements in it and limitations on it. There is a geographic component to establishing the areas eligible for TIFs. One of the ways to meet that eligibility requirement is to have a designated area. So the Ways and Means Committee took out reference to TIF on this in this section in their amendment, because they were uncomfortable with leaving it there, because this is a new program. The shapes and sizes of these designated areas and the number of them is currently unknown, because this is a new program. And so they were not comfortable automatically transferring the TIF district eligibility requirement to these new designated areas. And would be looking to potentially reevaluate that. Potentially if there's a technical correction bill or something else.
Okay.
So they removed that reference here, so it does beg the bigger question of. It is my understanding that the benefits in this section are the benefits that are currently extended to designated areas. But there wasn't much discussion in the House committee, other than for TIFs, whether or not any of these other incentives should be changed.
So I'm writing down for us, one of the questions for ACTV is. Which of these programs or benefits are existing? Earned in what way, and which are new? So. We have to want to understand them all. It would also be somewhat reassuring if we knew they already existed and were operating, that weren't unintentionally conflicted. Like somebody created fully program for each individual. You know what I'm saying?
Nikki, does that mean that the availability of any new TIFs goes away because it's not referenced any longer here? Or is it more just standalone?
No, so the TIF statute is not being, itself is not being changed, and this program won't start until sometime in potentially late 2026 or 2027. There are other available criteria for the geographic component that could be used. It sort of was like an eligible, like, do you have one or more of the following things to become geographic criteria, and designated area is one of them.
Okay, that makes,
And so, it is not changing that,
so it's not like stranding it as a program.
no.
That's all I need.
But the Ways and Means Committee was interested in spending more time in the future determining whether or not that specific criteria should be reevaluated. Also, all TIF districts have to be approved by the General Assembly anyways, and there's so. Yeah,
Oh. Or somebody has to.
You're still tips, right?
Yes, I think we're done.
but I think we probably should move on.
You've been certified by the National TIF States, Main Street TIF Associations.
Yeah, we don't
The
wanna,
TIFs we have today in the state of Vermont were not the TIFs that we passed. Our TIFs are now banked by the Ed Fund. They're no longer local municipal TIFs that get permission to do it and then follow the rules of TIFs. They're a hybrid that is changed. Could get rid of, get served, the actual Main Street TIF authorization.
But that's,
So there's a bigger conversation we could have.
Oh, yeah.
Now that they're, yes, and since they're removed, then, let's keep going. I don't think we're quite gonna get to the finish line in the next 8 minutes, but we'll get analyzed and closer.
well, are there any designated downtowns currently? That there's not a TIF district that isn't also like a designated downtown, like that,
I can absolutely.
oh, okay. There's many, one,
Two.
if that's the only way,
designated area.
okay, so there's only a, cause it seems like.
Don't necessarily overlap.
One of the locations, Megan Sullivan, Vice President of Affairs, Church, the Chamber of Commerce, one of the criteria on location, you have to meet 2 out of 3 location-based criteria. One of them is your TIF district is located within a designated downtown,
Yeah.
village center, growth area, new town center. Within, not that has to be the boundary, but it's within that boundary. So if we're getting rid of those titles for designation centers, then that has to get updated. But that's only, you have to meet 2 out of 3 criteria, and there are, I believe, Milton had a TIF district that's now retired that met the other 2, or was actually before that criteria. And Ellington, which does not meet those things.
Okay.
That is one.
Thank you, Commissioner. But you know, the district is not defined on where it's, just where it's located. But who pays back the money, where's the money going? That's what's changed. So it's good to think of.
Okay, so line 20 on 116, I think.
Great, so the next section is on designated neighborhoods, so, page 117. The Regional Planning Commission may request approval from the Environmental Review Board for designation of areas on the regional plan future land use map as a designated neighborhood under 10 VSA 6033. Areas eligible for designation include planned growth areas and village areas identified on the regional plan future land use map. This designation recognizes the vitality of downtowns and villages and their adjacent neighborhoods, and the benefit structure must ensure that any subsidy for sprawl repair or infill development locations within a neighborhood is secondary to a primary commitment to maintain livability and maximize the climate resilience and flood safe infill potential of these areas. I just wanna just reference that on line 4, planned growth area and village area are the areas that are part of the regional plan mapping, so there's some synergy there of like those 4 categories are each here. Approval of planned growth areas and village areas as designated neighborhoods shall follow the same process as approval for designated centers in 6033. And consistent with sections 4348 and 4348A of this title. Transition. Any municipality with an existing designated center, existing designated growth center or neighborhood development area will retain current benefits until July 1, 2029. Or upon approval of the regional plan future land use maps, whichever comes first. All existing neighborhood development area or growth center designations in effect on July 1, 2024 will expire on July 1, 2029. If the regional plan future land use map does not gain approval. All benefits that are removed for neighborhood development areas. And growth centers under the chapter. On to page 118. Shall remain active with prior designations existing as of July 1, 2024 until July 1, 2032. During the period of transition, no renewal shall be required for the existing designations. Prior to the approval of a regional plan future land use map by the ERB, new neighborhood development area designations may be approved by the state board. Requirements. A designated neighborhood shall meet the requirements for a planned growth area or village area as described in 4340A of this title. Benefits. A designated neighborhood is eligible for the following benefits. General grant priority for bylaws and special purpose plans, capital plans, and area improvement or reinvestment plans, including the Better Connections program and other programs identified in department guidance. Funding priority for infrastructure project scoping, design, engineering, and construction by state programs. Access to the downtown and village center tax credit program. Priority consideration for state and federal affordable housing funding. Certain appeal limitations under chapter 76A, under chapter 117. On page 119. Authority for the municipal legislative body to lower speed limits to less than 25 miles per hour within the neighborhood. State wastewater application fee capped at 58% for residential development. And exclusion from the land gain tax. Transition. On or before June 30th, 2026, the Regional Planning Commission shall update the regional plan future land use maps to delineate downtowns or village centers, planned growth areas, which may encompass a downtown center or village center, and village areas. Notwithstanding the other provisions of this chapter, new applications for designation under the prior chapter 76A framework shall end upon approval of a regional plan future land use map by the ERB. Designation data center. The department shall maintain an online municipal planning database, planning data center, publishing approved regional plan future land use maps, and indicating the status of each approved designation within the region and associated steps for the centers.
But if we stop up of page 1. Let's go to this. Okay. Thank you very much. We've had so interesting finding 620 on the committee. All those here. Pausing to have some three updates, so we have 3 people coming through. I don't know, see Mr. Brady, Mr. Tucker, and Mr. Rusher.
What?
No, and
My. So I think still on.
I don't.
Sorry.
Brady, he's here, he's out in the hall.
Jill.
Okay, there he is.
Are.
Good morning, Mr.
Nice to
Brady.
meet you, I promise.
Good to see you.
It's
Please join us. So, we're all on the 10 minutes clock here, but. Very
Yeah.
I can deliver 10 minutes.
testimony, so, you know where we are, we're going through 687, we've been, looking at lots of provisions and. We're looking here from VLCT to see if, well, you know. What you all think about what's in 687.
You got it. Thanks for the record, Ted Brady, the Executive Director of the Vermont League Cities and Towns. I have some prepared testimony that I'm gonna skip over half of it. And bring it straight down to 687, which if you're following along at home and you're reading this document, it's on page 2. And generally, our take on 687 is that location based jurisdiction should depend on location. Not on process and capacity. Which is just a general sense of some of the things I want to highlight in the bill that we are concerned don't actually live up to that whole idea of location-based jurisdiction. So in general, we're concerned that the language establishing new exemptions for designated areas using tier 1A and tier B terminology will be overly restrictive. And based on municipalities' bureaucracy and capacity instead of based on the land use maps and the planning contained elsewhere in the bill. I want to be clear, it's not a. That sounds worse than it is. There's just some things we think could be adjusted in how you define tier 1A and tier B that will adjust that. And so specifically bringing your attention to section 29, adding 10 VSA instead of subsection 34. It includes to achieve tier 1A status, it includes 11 criteria a town needs to meet. Including provisions require urban form bylaws, including 4-story development, including wildlife habitat planning bylaws, capital plans and budgets, adequate municipal staff. These are overly burdensome provisions that do not relate to going back to location-based jurisdiction. If we all agree that this is where things need to be built, whether or not they're going to have urban form bylaws is less important than the fact that they're building this stuff here, so we don't build it somewhere else. I also want to point out the reason Vermont's so special is we have character in all these towns. And requiring some of these things would require certain types of development to all look roughly the same, as opposed to every town having something a little different in it. And that's the urban form bylaw specifically that I'm talking about there. Height requirements create cookie cutter downtowns. And some towns want to have 6-story buildings, some want to have 4, some want to have 3. I understand we need to balance the fact that we have infrastructure in these places. But I don't support the idea that they all need to look the same. Wildlife planning bylaws in the mostly densely populated developed areas seem to ignore the fact that preserving most of the state for wildlife. Also, many of the provisions in the wildlife bylaws, the historic preservation bylaws that are required in this bill to be a tier 1A are included in other places in state law, like the state downtown designation program. I also want to bring attention to. I've lost my notes, trying to be quick. I'm losing it.
We've experienced this before.
Also just talking about tier 3 areas. Appreciate the idea that we're doing this via rulemaking. We think that's the right way. I'm not personally convinced that we found the right balance defining what tier 3 is, even in charging the NRB or the environmental board with doing this. Just because it's really important to recognize that every town in Vermont, even if you're in the maps tell us that this is a sensitive area, every town in Vermont should have the ability to grow a living. And should have the ability to be economically successful and have a grand list that supports the need to plow roads and educate your kids and all that fun stuff. And I'm worried that tier 3 provisions might not strike that right balance. Unfortunately, much like many other people, I don't have the solution for you today. I also, so that takes me off of tier 1A and tier 1B. 1B, we have similar concerns about the definition of municipal staffing needs. to qualify to be a tier 1B, like what is adequate municipal staffing? In planning and zoning, you have to have a zoning administrator. That seems to me to be adequate staffing. I hope that you and the NRB, URB agree with that, but it's not clear that it does the way it's written. Moving on to a different topic. Concerns about redefining RPC and municipal relationships. The House did a really nice job of writing a needle on this. RPCs are technical assistance providers to municipalities. There were several versions of the bill that had them as essentially regulators, saying yes and no. That's changed in this bill, largely. One of the issues that I am still concerned about is in section 29. 10 VSA 6034E allows a regional planning commission from an adjacent regional planning commission territory to be an interested party in appeal rights. So the RPC next door doesn't like what the RPC over there is doing. They get to come in and appeal rights. We're not thrilled about that. We'd like that to be removed. And then section 37 modifies how regional plans are approved. Currently, there is a provision that allows towns to veto a regional plan. If 60% of the towns in the region vote against it, after it's been enacted, it vetoes the regional plan. This is important because remember that RPC reps, the people that go from the town, are not always the select board members. And this is just a really nice check and balance. I don't think it's ever been used. I don't think it ever will be used. But removing it suggests to us that we're losing an ability and buy into the RPC. So we'd like it restored. Section 37. Finally, section 33 amends 24 VSA and adds a new 4460. And this requires municipalities to take over Act 250 permits when they assume tier 1A status. Some municipalities are willing to do this, others will not be.
If you may just ask a question of what you were just talking about, with 37, so you're saying 37, it was removed, the 60% piece? I
Yes.
thought that was, I guess I'm not seeing it in here, but I thought it was, we did have that somewhere else in the bill. Maybe I misunderstand.
Let me find the section and email it to you if that's okay.
Because I think, right, I think it's come up, it came up in our walkthrough, but I don't know where it's.
Yeah.
Where on the fly, so.
Yeah.
I'm just.
I'll email that and I'll correct myself if I'm incorrect, but I think I've read the right version.
See, I agree with you, and I think it is on another part of the bill, but if it's not, I would. Yeah. So, let's see. It doesn't win.
Right.
Thank you.
I have changed my sections many times, with vacation and things that I.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So just on Act 250 permits, some towns are gonna be willing to do this. I think there are a lot of towns that are going to be unwilling to take on the permit requirements that are defined in here. And that will discourage people from participating in tier 1A program, then we may want to participate. Again, they don't have a elegant solution there. But I think it's a real thing to remember. Telling a municipality they're gonna have to enforce the permits that were created 25 years ago on a development. It's not really that exciting to many zoning administrators and PRBs and such. Hey, overall, just appreciate other elements, the municipal planning grant program expansion in here, changes to the community investment program. Largely appreciate the effort there. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. Can you send written comments or?
Yes.
Yes, great. You're ahead, thank you, no surprise. Just want to make sure that all can distribute community members and chase down cross references. Yeah, so on the question of permit conditions, on an Act 250 permit, and we talk about extinguishment versus carrying them forward and who would carry them forward. Did you contemplate having the NRB, ERB still regulate those? I mean, was that like, if they were issued by the NRB, they should continue to enforce?
I think the elegant balance would be to say, The town has the option of taking them over and enforcing them, or asking the NRB, ERB to enforce them if they don't want to, recognizing extinguishing them. There are some extinguishments in the bill, right? But I get that there are some you don't want to extinguish because they're conditional on success of that development working for the environment.
Right.
So I think having an option of either the town taking them or the ERB holding on, as opposed to, I think the way it's worded now is the town takes them, and if the town messes up, the ERB basically comes in and breaks the heavy hand, right?
Great. Any questions from Mr. Brady?
Right.
Zero.
So you listed off the places that you feel are too burdensome, like the urban bylaws, urban form bylaws. What do you feel about the flooding that section?
Well, I'm opposed to flooding. I think it's a reasonable expectation.
Okay, that one is fine. Okay, thank you, I appreciate it.
There was a suggestion of somebody else about the tier one, I think it was the tier 1B designations that right now it's an opt-in, but because they are a little perfunctory, you know, like they're very clear, like where would qualify. Moving that to an opt-out.
Yeah, I think as long as you're giving a town an option, it
Okay,
doesn't matter if you opt in or opt out in my
Okay,
office.
oh, cool, great, thanks.
As long as you have an option.
Right, an option, one way or the other.
Can I ask wait, can I ask one other question?
Yes.
Okay, we don't get to have you in here as often as I think we really should when we're talking about the level of interactions we'll have with every municipality, so I do. Let me hear from you. TIF districts. We talked about them briefly, you were not in the room. There was a removal of TIF districts from consideration within a section of this bill. You don't have to answer now, but perhaps you could ponder that with what was taken out from Ways and Means, and if you have a position on it.
The formal position would be, all of these places should have the right to use the TIF program. I am not convinced that the language removal actually makes it so they don't, because of the existing TIF statute. But I don't know that, like, I've done a little, I have not done the deep dive.
Okay, thank you.
Restoring it would be wonderful.
Okay.
This would be the easiest.
All right, thanks so much.
Thanks, and just a reminder, I didn't talk about 311. I have lots to say about 311 if you ever want to have you back. It's in my written testimony.
Right, yeah, and so to the point about having to go back, we're gonna be convening, we got cleared to have an extra meeting on Monday. So we'll be doing a lot of grinding finally towards a draft report for the bill for next Monday. And I don't know if it's Tuesday, or both either Tuesday or, you know, sometimes it's still over to the next legislative day to have a clean votable copy of that.
Look forward to Monday.
We'll warn this forum, so. We ran out of time last time, so we are.
You run out of time.
You can, be brief, you can be finished by 10 of, that'd be great, but just a little more. Let's jump right in.
Peter Tucker for the Vermont Association of Realtors. Thanks for having me here today. And you know, I am going to start out with 311 because I think that, you know, from our perspective in terms of housing initiatives, that including interim exemptions is critically important to be added to this bill. So, you know, in H 687, I think the appropriate place is going to be section 26. That's the definitions of Act 250. And this is, I will have provided testimony. So in place of what is in section 26 now, if you substitute section 2 and 3 from H 311, that accomplishes those interim exemptions simply. To do that, you would have to look at section 28. A has a threshold at 25 units, so if it would conflict with that language. And then 28C on jurisdictional opinions. I'll just take a second on this because we spent last year talking about whether or not jurisdictional opinions would apply. As we've seen, in testimony, from Evernorth, I believe, jurisdiction opinions can be appealed. And so, if you're creating a housing incentive, having for most developers, what they're really trying to do is to have some certainty in terms of when they can start their discussion, and if it's appealable, I think they're gonna avoid that, and we've heard that from different housing developers as well. As far as the environmental board, we've always favored having a professional environmental board to back up the 9 district commissions. What we've heard is that district commissions have a variety of different opinions on things. There's not a lot of consistency. There's also, in terms of timing, that's when things seem to get bogged down. So having that professional board to really manage that oversight is important. I'm just address tiers, I guess, and then, kind of call it a day. So, tier 1A, tier 1B, I think we've done, everybody, the Natural Resources Board Summer Study has done a great job of kind of defining how they work. Interested to hear from League of Cities and Towns, because I do think that, towns are not willing to jump through all the hoops that are there. This isn't really going to accomplish the goals that we're setting out to accomplish. Tier 3 is something that I think really, the way we view it in the descriptions that have come through so far, there's some disparate environmental impacts here. When I think about tier 3, I'm thinking about forest lands, connective habitat, and elevations above 2,500 feet. But this adds river corridors, headland waters, things of that nature. They're very different kinds of environmental situations and impacts. And we know that rivers run through basically every town in Vermont. We're going to have to really consider how we manage those areas. And that's why the interim exemptions are important, I think, to push, because we're not going to incent development in the river corridors as much. We need to have more room to grow for most communities. And then on tier 2, and this is really where I think the work needs to really consider things. Because tier 2 is not tier 1, not tier 3, it's the whole rest of the state. And probably is like 80% of the state. I mean, it's going to be a large portion of the state, let me say that. And it covers a variety of different areas, from hamlets to farmland, to working lands, to forest lands, and actually all the areas outside of the tier 1A or 1B exempted areas within those towns as well. So tier 2 is this massive part of Vermont, and I think that it really does need to be better defined. And I've heard people say, well, tier 2 will just have the same old Act 250 standards that were there before, but that's not the case in this bill. Forest blocks, connective habitats would be a new standard to consider tier 2. The road rule, which if I ask my members, they oppose the road rule, right? It's just kind of logical. It's an impact on property owners. But we understand it's important. And I think that what I would ask this committee to do is to consider what parts of tier 2 should the road rule really apply to. The definitions in the RPC definitions, land definitions, starting on page 87, really do a good job of describing, all these different designated areas. And we would encourage those definitions to actually be incorporated into the environmental boards, kind of their definitions as well. And they do include things like H is rural, general, I, rural, agricultural, forestry, and J, rural conservation. So, as when you consider the road rule, maybe those are the areas that the road rule should apply to, not the little hamlets. And then obviously tier 3, would be a place where that would apply. So those are, kind of our general comments. I have provided written testimony and also included kind of the sections of S311 that and I'm sure you're gonna want to add to this, the housing appropriations. They did a land bank study, which we talked about a couple of years ago in economic and housing. And we would be part of that group. And, you know, as far as the studies in this particular, bill, you know, when possible, the Realtor Association would like to be added, to those study groups, because, you know, we're pretty involved in it so far and appreciate the opportunity, going forward. So I've got some other comments written, but happy to stop there.
Okay,
Okay,
well done.
all of that.
Thanks for your written comments, so we can give us with that, and that I'll ask membership on committees. If there's a committee that you don't see yourself listed on, and say, like to suggest we choose, you can just flag that, and help us
Yep, it's,
keep an eye.
and then, and one other thing, if I may, in closing, and then, going over my 3 minutes, but, you know, I think that the timing is really tight on a lot of these things, you know, can the NRV, you know, accomplish their goals within the timeframe set? You know, we think that the interim exemptions ought to extend out, you know, we discussed earlier, for 5 years to 2029. You know, to allow for all that work to be done, mapping, rulemaking, and then, you know, really quite honestly, for municipalities to take this on and actually accomplish the objective of satisfying the designation program. It's gonna take some time. So,
Thank you again.
great, thank you. Nice to see everybody. Thanks.
Zarache, so we haven't seen you, I don't know, in the chair this year, good to see you back, thanks for flying me down the hallway and saying you'd like.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity. I will try not to talk too fast so you can understand me and try not to have a cough, which I do when I'm getting nervous. But I'm Jill Roche, I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Association of Conservation Districts. I live in Waitsfield. I've been in this job, I don't know, 13 years or something. I've had the opportunity to review H687 briefly, so I didn't give you comments bullet by bullet, but I did by section. Or I've written them, I actually haven't sent them because it's sort of broad state here. I have given you a handout about the role of conservation districts in state and federal programs, as well as a special relationship we have with USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, which has to do with identifying local resource needs through a community engagement process, conducting natural resource assessments, developing conservation action plans. I just want to read the purpose part of our statute, which is only a paragraph. The legislature wants to provide for conservation development and use of the natural resources of the state, and that the lands, water, forests, wildlife of the state of Vermont are among the basic assets of the state, and that the preservation of these lands, water, forests, and wildlife by conservation development and use is necessary to protect and promote the health, safety, and general welfare of people and its people. So this is the Soil Conservation Act. Way back when, late 30s, like the 1940, that was finally passed, and this is a founding statute. So I just wanted you to know that that's our core purpose. The goals of my testimony are to support the efficient use of state resources by making sure you're not duplicating efforts and you're aware of the resources that are available, particularly the assets that conservation districts bring to the conservation world. I want to make sure that people who make a living from the land, what we call the working landscape, so farmers, forest landowners, land managers, get a voice in this process. You know, they've been very sort of municipality focused in a lot of the discussions, and preserve lands, but not people in between those two things. And we also, as you already know, want to provide conservation districts the resources to do the work that they have to do.
We should do that.
Thank you. Sorry, I know I'm talking fast. I'm trying to get you out of here.
Good.
I know you've been here all morning. So in our statute, conservation districts conduct studies, natural resource assessments, develop conservation action plans. We participate in the state's tactical basin planning process and contribute information to that process. We facilitate community engagement processes, both with the state and with NRCS. We're already plugged into the historically underserved, served, and environmental justice community in that process. And we provide technical assistance and implement projects and programs in all natural resources areas including agriculture, forestry, streams, lakes, habitat, stormwater, I just name some of them. We work very closely with state and federal partners. We're part of something called the Agricultural Water Quality Partnership, which is 9 agencies that are signatories to an information sharing MOU, and we meet monthly actually to coordinate efforts. These are my general comments on the bill, and it's all about making sure conservation districts and our customers are included in the deliberation process. So it's somewhat repetitive. We'd like conservation districts to be a party of right in environmental court hearings, so to be listed as a party of right. We'd like conservation districts to be included in the rulemaking stakeholder groups for both forest fragmentation, habitat continuity, and tier 3 definitions. Those are 2 sections where I saw rulemaking outlined. This is due to our local familiarity with these resources and connection to federal and state programs that support landowners in protecting these resources. I think most of you know we traditionally work with the private landowner. That's expanded to be land user, land stewards. You know, sometimes it's not actually the landowner, it's the person who's using the land and managing and stewarding the land. And we also work with municipalities within the interface between the two. But in our relationship, I think you also know that the Natural Resources Conservation Service is the largest funder of conservation programs on private lands in the United States. So, and we're a key partner for them to enable them to engage with the individual landowner individually and collectively. Let's see, we should be notified of applications for tier 1 status and have the opportunity to provide opinions on these applications. We would like to be core partners in the tier 2 definition process. So this is especially where there's juice for us. This is where our customers live and work. This is where the working landscape is between protected lands and towns. I want to make sure that they have a voice in this process, and we can help facilitate that through local stakeholder group meetings and assessments. Sorry. We would like to be included in the creation of regional plans. So here, I have a bit of a concern of recreating the wheel. There's quite a bit of conservation planning, so it depends on. So for the part that has to do with soil and water health, obviously we're not transportation experts, but and the viability of the local rural economy or the working lands rural economy. We want to be sure that those people are included in that process of defining what tier 2 is, and who's and how, so that everybody's aware of what the impact could be. Let's see, and last but not least, you already know we have a core funding request into the legislature, and we're looking for your support with that request. I think I'll stop there, just giving some good.
Do we have in writing your funding request?
Yes. Would you like me to resend it?
Yes, please.
So it's a 3 million, overall it's a 3 million request. It passed out of the House unchanged, although it received highest priority from House Ag and a mention from House Environment and Energy, support from, and very high support from Senate Ag right now. They're advocating for us in the Senate creation. So I know that there's some compromising going on, one-time funds and general funds.
And do you know what that, so the governor's recommended included all 3?
The governor's recommended was, we were last year at 612 base funding. We were cut by 112,000 to 500. And this is in a grant run through the Agency of Agriculture. So when they were told you have 3% to work with, they went and cut their grant programs. It had to do with the framework they were given for developing the budget. So at a minimum, we'd like to restore that. It sounds like peanuts, but for us, it means a lot. Going from $78,000 per district to 35,000, which is what we were able to do this year, made a huge difference in their ability to sort of take the next step. What's happened is districts, there's a lot of opportunities for districts, and they can't take advantage of all of that because they don't have the core funding for the management and administrative infrastructure. So we have districts like, we know there's a need, but we just can't do anymore because they don't have that capacity to manage 40 grants, one district like 40 grants a year. So that's.
Thank you.
And we did submit a one-time request to send it out over the weekend, because they said there might be some one-time funds. And that's a combination of vehicles, farm and field equipment, and office and communications technology.
Well, one thing, especially if you're working with an ag, and Senator Starr serves on appropriations, then you have a reliable voice at the table on these things in the law. But doesn't mean we won't advocate as well, but
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Do you need me to send you something section by section, or is this clear enough? Send it to you, okay.
yeah, thanks.
And should I use the as passed by the House version for reference?
Sure, that's what
Okay,
we're,
because that's the one I reviewed, but like the other versions already.
exactly right,
No,
that's what we're.
Oh, that's still waiting for it. Yeah.
We'll have an extract, but I don't. It's fine, you know, if. I don't know if we'll see it by the end of this week or we'll see it on Monday, moving back. It's a lot of traffic.
Yes, well, everybody's interested in the use of land in Vermont. We all have an interest in it, right? For our own well-being, so. I appreciate you working through this. It's a tough bill.
Well, thanks so much for coming in and thank you, committee.